So at this point I've done a huge trip down to Kent, several hours, and the weather was said to be good, but the weather person lied, so we did actually get some rain, and it was just like this. The Discovery was spinning water up at these bearings. So these bearings were at nearly £3 to replace, and inside of here is an oil-soaked felt seal. I'm not happy about it. I've got to do something to stop it. So primarily, a huge aluminium checker plate to go on here. They still want some extra protection. So I've taken these caps off, and I've drilled and tapped an M6 hole in each side there and there. And then you can see these will fit on there, and they get bolted down. So I'm going to make these covers for all 9 bearings exposed. The only thing I found with these bearings when I took them apart was water ingress damage, really. They weren't worn, they were rusted and pitted. So if I can protect them, they have a static load capacity of 13 tonnes each. They'll never go wrong, really. I've completed all the covers now. This one has a slight lean to it that way. This one has a slight angle on it, allowing the door to open for the cupboard. And the rest of them pretty normal and plain. They're covering a huge amount of the bearing, so the water can drip onto the shaft, but it has to go a long way along the shaft before it gets to the bearing. So I'm pretty happy that those are going to really protect it all from rain. Particularly that this is covered, and the front is now covered from being splashed by the tow vehicle. So those covers come very close to the front cover, and they still overlap the shaft as well. So next I'm going to work on these covers. You can see I've cut them to shape already. There's one there and one there, but they need support. So angle iron there, angle iron in here, between these two to support that way. So on goes the attaching piece. You can see I've used dome top Allen screws for most of it, but when this cover goes on, you'll see I'm using a 13mm M8 bolt hex head, which is more easily removed. So if I'm using the brake for mapping, that can come off fairly easily when I'm using it, to give that extra bit of cooling for the brake if it needs it. And the front on here, I've actually sealed this as well, so no water can get down the middle anyway. Only the middle really, where the bearings are, and then tighten her up. And then there's a specially made galvanized drip tray, which is going to be cut into that one and sit here, lower down. So it gives me a little bit more room to manoeuvre underneath, and it will catch anything if a car leaks a load of oil or something. That frame with a 25 by 25 box section, and welded in captive nuts as well, so it's all nicely held together. And a fairly tight fit. You can see me wrestling to get it together in a second. And then this drip tray was sort of tailor-made, about £80 it was. So I'm fairly happy with that. There's a drain either end, because the rolling road would typically be on a slope anyway. So I have options to slope it one way or the other, and I can put some drain pipe on there as well, taking any burning fluids away from the rolling road, safely away, That looks wicked. That is so cool. So I've got a drain hole either end as well, and I'm going to route hosing down and under and forward, so any leaking petrol would be out on the floor over here, limiting damage. Chuffed to bits with that. Right, I've finished these axle stands now. I'm really pleased with how they've come out. They're all painted up, and they're nice and straight. I did them on the lathe, so that's nice and actually, what's the word, aligned with the bottom half. And then the gazebo leg just slides in there, so we're really pleased with that. And then a 36cm taller with a nice big footprint now. I've also painted the last parts of the ramps, which are these two that clamp onto the middle section of ramp and bolt into these old trailer ramps. So they all look nice and smart. It just slides in there, and then the bolts go through. This is what I normally do when I get the car in the rollers like this. Only for rear-wheel drive, you can just spin them over so the car finds its centre. It's nice and easy, and then you can put the straps on. This is how I'd normally strap a beam axle carlet. You can see 2 straps, one either side, pulling vertically downwards and holding that beam axle down into the rollers. It's nice and safe. It's the safest way of doing it, which is why I only put 2 straps on my car, but I've always put 6 on other people's car. I wanted to try, just to satisfy my curiosity, would it work with 1 strap? The fail-safe theory. So here we go, totally on my own. This is not involving anybody else. So I did a power run with 1 strap, which was pretty scary, but absolutely fine. So I am confident now when the car is in the rollers, there's a redundancy built in. And all other cars I've put 6 straps on anyway, so several straps can fail actually, and the car still won't go anywhere. This I made to lift the car. It's a jig that I can lift the car just out of the rollers. Because it has a solid beam axle, the suspension is upstream of the axle. I can lift just the axle, which means I've only got to relieve the pressure on the tyre to get it off the rollers, rather than depressing the whole suspension, lifting the whole suspension on a car. So you can see it in action here, like just a slight lift, and the suspension is still compressed. You see the weight is still on the axle, so that's fine. And I can lift the car out of the rollers now. So this is a piece of work I did with Mrs. Laws here, you can see, where I need her to get the car right up to a maximum speed of the rolling road, which is about 150 miles an hour, or 2,500 RPM at the rollers. And then I lift the car out, so I can basically do a coast down without the car on it. That's the whole purpose. So I do coast downs for every customer, and that finds a really nicely accurate engine figure. But I want to do a coast down without the car, so I can, so I know exactly the losses in the bearings and air loss, wind resistance losses of the rolling road and the brake, all by itself. And that means I can then give a fairly accurate wheel horsepower figure. So it'll never be as accurate as engine horsepower, but it's reasonably accurate wheel horsepower figure. So I had to turn the whole rolling road and do this the other way as well, because there's impeller fans. The impellers on the fan rotate the different ways, so they give a slightly different mass of air moving through them, and therefore a different slowing effect. So I did actually have to do this twice. Pretty scary, but no problem really. Obviously I had the car strapped horizontally only, but not vertically, so I could still lift it up, you see. That was absolutely terrifying. Not something I wish to repeat, and luckily I don't have to repeat it, so that's lovely. That was all for the purpose of discovering the rolling road's internal losses. If I can figure out how much energy is wasted in the rollers themselves and the fan, the big fan on the back, then I'll be able to give an accurate wheel horsepower figure, which I've not been able to do up to this point. Mrs. Laws was very helpful. She drove it, she was scared. She was scared. I was scared. I wouldn't wish that on any customer or anything like that. It's not something I'm going to repeat, but wow, that was horrible. So the car went up to 150 miles an hour, so my glasses were fogging up with the condensation from the exhaust gases, and then she got the car to 150 and I lifted it off, and you'll see there was a failed attempt as well, where one of the wheels didn't come cleanly off, so that was annoying. You can see we lock the wheels, it's rubbing on this side. I drop the car, the wheels turn again, and then I go and tell Sarah to apply the brakes to slow it all down. I shouldn't have done that. You can see the far wheel stops turning now, produces a ton of smoke, and I put a huge flat spot on that tyre, which is really unfortunate. But we're there now, it's done. I'm very pleased. I'm going to use that figure now, and I'm going to start some experimentation with wheel horsepower losses. I can also now use the brake to try and slow down a run and measure power that way as well. So I'm going to get into that now. Oh, wow. You can now hear that flat spot on the tyre. Very annoying. Okay, with wheel horsepower now calibrated using the coast down from my crazy coast down experiment, I've now got accurate wheel horsepower here, peaking at just around about 6,000 RPM, or close enough to 6,000 RPM. So 6,000 RPM max wheel horsepower was 193. So I'm now going to set the brake to hold the engine at 6,000 RPM. It'll be there for about 5 seconds, and we should get a wheel reading very close to that number within, I don't know, 3 horsepower, something like that. And I know then that this is very accurate again, because I've calibrated the load cell on the brake. Big sunbug. Start the test, and here we go. That number there, 293. Fantastic.